You are listening to Midday with Maria Shilaos. Some of the top leaders in the Utah Legislature are doubling down on their calls that a southern Utah judge resign for comments made during a recent sentencing. You'll recall the situation from last month. Judge Don Torgerson referred to the defendant's privilege when deciding upon a sentence. 22-year-old Aiden Hoffman had pleaded guilty to 2 felony charges of sexual exploitation of a minor. He was given a suspended prison sentence and was placed on probation. He also had to register as a sex offender. Utah Speaker of the House Mike Schultz spoke exclusively to KSL TV's Daniel Woodruff about the comments from the judge and the new bipartisan letter calling for his resignation. A warning, some of the description of the events are graphic.
When I heard the comments, it was concerning. But when I dug into the information and learned what the judge had just watched, the video that the judge watched of the 6-year-old girl being duct taped and raped against her will, and the judge's comments after that was, "I've seen worse." That's not okay. That's horrific. Even if the judge had seen worse, you don't say that in the court. You don't say that in front of the defendant. That's horrific, and that's not okay. That was hard for me. And then to reference this kid's privilege and coming from privilege and referencing, 112 days is a long time in jail from a kid that comes from privilege or a person that comes from privilege. Those are concerning comments to me. And I think, those things coupled together with the light sentence, I think is really concerning to me, and where I do think that this judge needs to resign. And look, I get and understand, we all make comments that we regret. I've made several comments that I regret, but walking them back is an important part of the process. And if you feel bad about that, you say it. You walk back from those comments. And that's what this judge should have done. He should have walked back from those comments, but instead they didn't. The courts came out with a statement that was not accurate, and you guys reported on that it wasn't accurate. And so, you add all those things together and we have a problem here. And that's why, we're still asking that this judge resign. And if this judge doesn't resign, then I've asked Chief Justice Durant to look into it and find the appropriate measures.
The letter is signed by both Speaker Schultz and House Minority Leader Angela Romero. She tells Daniel Woodruff that it was important for both leaders to send a unified message to the judiciary.
I just really had some concerns with what the judge said to the individual and didn't follow the recommendations of the prosecution. Of course, judges have their own discretion, but when you use words like that, it gives a chilling effect to victims of sexual assault, or in this case, this was just observing something. But still, we saw this happen in California with a young woman who was sexually assaulted, and her perpetrator wasn't given any jail time because he was a good boy. And this felt like a similar conversation that was happening, talking about this young man's privilege.
You've signed on to the letter. You and the speaker don't always sign on to letters together.
No.
What made you want to do that this time?
I just felt like it was an important message for us to send to that judge, to think about the words and the power he has, and the impact it has on victims of sexual assault, child sex abuse. Those are areas I specialize in. But also, the speaker and I agree when it comes to transparency. Every vote we take, every decision we make is documented after. There's nothing there for the judiciary. It'd be nice to be able to, like if someone's made a ruling, to have that a little bit more transparent. I'm not talking about videos in the courtroom. I'm talking about after a judgment's been made.
Let's now bring on KSL TV's Daniel Woodruff to go more in-depth on this. First of all, Daniel, it's pretty rare for these two to sign a letter together.
And I noted that when I talked to Leader Romero. You usually see a degree of cooperation between Republicans and Democrats, but not typically on a lot of things. And in this case, I was intrigued because Speaker Schultz has called previously for this judge to resign. But now, a month after we initially reported this story, you've got the House Minority Leader joining forces with him and saying, the things that this judge said are not okay, and we collectively together as the top Republican and Democrat in the House of Representatives believe that the judge should step down and that the judiciary should investigate this.
Yeah, and what else does it say in this letter?
It talks about the response that the courts made to our story. So our story aired in May, And about 5 or 6 days later, the courts put out a statement basically criticizing KSL and saying that we intentionally omitted certain facts from the story. And they particularly pointed to the plea agreement that this defendant had agreed to, and the courts alleged that it specifically said that he would not go to prison. If you go and actually read the plea agreement, that is not what it said. It, in fact, gave the prosecutor the right to argue for prison time, which he did. Speaker Schultz and Leader Romero both had an issue with how the courts responded, feeling that they were disingenuous and not telling the truth about the facts surrounding this case in an effort to defend this judge. Both of them feel the judge should have apologized and owned his words, but he didn't.
So what, if anything, has Judge Torgerson said publicly about this?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Only the courts.
And you've reached out to him?
We have through the courts, yep, multiple times.
Okay,
I'm happy to sit down with him for the record if he is listening to this and would like to explain what he meant. I'm happy to give him an interview, just as I have given interviews to multiple other people in this story.
You alluded to this. After your first report, the state's judiciary issued that statement that saying part of your story wasn't true. Remind us what part they thought wasn't true.
The plea agreement. They said that in the plea agreement, it said that this guy would get probation. However, if you look at 2 points before that, it specifically says that both the defense and the prosecution have no stipulation or prior agreement about additional incarceration time, and that point would be argued in court. That's exactly what happened. During that sentencing hearing, the Grand County attorney pushed for prison time and said that this case was egregious and that there needed to be a message sent by sending this defendant to prison. Ultimately, the judge decided no additional time behind bars, no fine either, and 4 years probation.
Speaker Schultz seemed visibly angry and frustrated in your interview with him about this. So why is he so upset by the judge's remarks?
I actually asked him about that. I said, you seem angry. And he said, I don't know if it's anger or upset or hurt, but he said the biggest thing that irked him was knowing the material that was involved in this case, multiple images of children being raped and abused, and the fact that the judge had seen some of those images and then commented that he had seen worse. Those were his words, although he added that he didn't mean to minimize the seriousness of it. But Speaker Schultz really didn't like that and felt like it minimized the situation. And in the letter that he and Leader Romero sent to the judiciary, they said that they feel like the courts, the state court system, has minimized this by not taking responsibility, and that's why they're asking the Chief Justice to investigate and also calling for this judge himself to resign.
No word from the courts yet.
The courts did give us a statement last night saying that the Speaker and the Chief Justice had a productive meeting about this yesterday and that they look forward to continued conversations about the case. Nothing about whether the judge will stay on the bench or not.
Daniel, thanks for getting us up to date on the story.
Thanks, Maria.
And that is KSL 5's Daniel Woodruff.